Well, first of all, I want to say how much we at Metrolink appreciate the support that we get every day of the year from the sheriff departments, from the police departments, from the coroner's offices all around Southern California. We appreciate your help in making sure that we have a safe system all over the six counties, and that you also help us with responding to an episode, an accident, a collision when it occurs. We appreciate the need to do a complete and thorough investigation, but we also would be very grateful for your help in trying to clear a scene as soon as possible to get the folks on the train moving either on down to their destination or at least to the next station. This video and training program have been designed to help provide some suggestions, some ideas as to how you might help us clear accident scenes as quickly as possible. I hope that it proves to be useful. We look forward to working with you now and in the future, and again, we appreciate your help very much. Thank you.
Constantly be aware of your proximity to the rails and equipment. Don't become another casualty. Tunnel vision is just as dangerous on railroad property as in other locations, maybe more so due to the addition of moving equipment. Always expect to train on any track from either direction. Constantly be aware of your proximity to the rails and railroad equipment. Do not stand on the rails or between them, and never get comfortable standing between the rails. If your investigation requires you to occupy space between the rails, please notify Metrolink representatives at the scene prior to doing so. Do not crawl over, under, or in between railroad equipment. A train can begin moving at any time without notice, and there could be a high voltage issue to contend with. If you need access to the railroad equipment involved in your investigation, please contact Metrolink personnel at the scene before approaching that equipment. Don't use cell phones or radios within 25 feet of the right-of-way. Make it a habit to move away from the tracks while using communication devices. Do not park vehicles on the tracks or close to them. Park your vehicle at least 15 feet from the nearest rail to ensure it doesn't get struck by moving railroad equipment. It's important to leave access ways open so as not to obstruct other emergency responders or investigative personnel, such as the coroner, to the scene. Metrolink trains normally operate in a push-pull mode with a locomotive on one end of a train and an unpowered cab car on the other. In this configuration, it's common for a locomotive to be pushing a train and not pulling it. In some cases, locomotives can be found on both ends of a Metrolink train. Don't assume the locomotive designates the front of a train. Cab cars are non-powered passenger coaches equipped with controls used by an engineer to operate the train. When a cab car is leading, there will be a locomotive on the rear of the train pushing. Depending on the nature of the collision, the scene could be spread out over hundreds of yards. The train involved in the collision could be a half mile or more from the initial impact point. The scene could be extremely bloody with body parts along the right-of-way, rail equipment, and nearby structures or fencing. The rock ballast along the right-of-way can conceal body parts and evidence, so stay vigilant. Pay close attention to where you step, grab, or lean, especially during the hours of darkness. Depending on the nature of the collision, there could be organs, tissue, or bodily fluids on railroad equipment surfaces, steps, and handrails. If necessary, biohazard crews will be dispatched to the collision scenes to decontaminate rail equipment and the right-of-way after civil authorities have concluded their investigation. 480-volt electrical power is supplied to Metrolink trains through thick rubber-coated copper cables running from the locomotive to each passenger car. If these cables are damaged due to colliding with an object, they can present a serious electrical hazard. If it is necessary, as part of an investigation, to work within close proximity to the head-end power cables, please contact a railroad representative who can have the cables de-energized. Metrolink understands that thorough investigations of trespasser and grade crossing collisions must be conducted. Metrolink will do whatever is necessary to provide assistance and resources to civil authorities in an effort to further and/or enhance their investigative efforts. Please remember, there could be hundreds of passengers on a train involved in a trespasser or grade crossing collision that may be forced to stay on the train for long periods of time while an investigation is taking place. This creates a hardship for those passengers and increases the likelihood of medical emergencies or other stress-induced incidents occurring on the train. In addition, thousands of passengers on other trains could be affected once trains start stacking up along the line on either side of the collision scene. Depending on the nature of the collision, railroad officials may ask you if certain steps can be taken to expedite the movement of trains on the affected track. Focusing the initial phase of the investigation on the train involved to help get it and the hundreds of passengers on it moving sooner. Calling the coroner immediately instead of waiting until the police investigation is finished or halfway finished. Ask the coroner to inspect the train first before turning their attention to the body. California Health and Safety Code 102850 requires an immediate notification to the coroner when a death is determined to fall under the jurisdiction of the coroner. Let trains move through or around the scene during the investigation. If multiple sets of railroad tracks are present, it may be possible to move trains around your investigation on tracks not directly affected by the collision. Let the train involved in the collision move to the closest Metrolink station so passengers can be transloaded onto other forms of transportation. The train and crew can be held at the station until released by civil authorities. If it is possible to move trains from or through the scene, the movement will be conducted at reduced speeds and under the direction of a railroad employee at the scene who is in contact with civil authorities. Train crew. The conductor and engineer can give you collision information, status of the train, passenger count, and injuries. The conductor will be the railroad incident commander until relieved. Field Operation Compliance and Security Director act as the railroad incident commander and will be the primary contact for civil authorities. Part of the incident commander's job is to get trains moving from and through the scene once civil authorities have given permission to resume rail traffic. The Field Operation Compliance Officer is also responsible for downloading the head-in video from locomotives and cab cars that were involved in the collision. Track employee in charge is responsible for setting up on-track safety to assist in protecting the scene. The track employee in charge will also inspect the condition of the track prior to allowing rail service to begin once permission is granted by civil authorities and the railroad incident commander. Signal maintainer can provide information regarding railroad signals that may be relevant to the incident being investigated. Mechanical personnel are responsible for inspecting the train to determine its mechanical condition following a collision. Los Angeles County Sheriff's Metrolink Bureau deputies will handle incidents on Metrolink trains. They will not act as the primary investigators at trespass or highway rail grade crossing collision incidents. Metrolink Bureau deputies will provide on-scene assistance to the local agencies who will assume responsibility to investigate such incidents. Metrolink personnel do not download head-in video from Amtrak or freight trains involved in collisions on Metrolink property. If Metrolink trains will not be delayed by a trespasser or grade crossing collision involving an Amtrak or freight train, Metrolink Field Operation Compliance Officers may not be dispatched to the scene. Investigating authorities will work directly with Amtrak and freight railroad personnel who will assume the railroad incident commander role. All Metrolink locomotives and cab cars are equipped with head-in video recorders, one forward-facing camera and two inward-facing cameras inside the locomotive and cab car control compartments. At the scene, investigating authorities may have access to the forward-facing video, but not the inward-facing video. If the investigation requires the viewing of the inward-facing video, additional authority from Metrolink will be necessary. Head-in video recorder cameras are recording if locomotives or cab cars are running or on power while stationary. The forward-facing head-in video camera will not capture events that occur within approximately 50 feet from the front of the locomotive due to equipment limitations. The quality of head-in video recorder imagery will give investigators a view of what occurred in front of a train prior to and after a collision, but it is not adequate to make positive identification of individuals seen in the video due to its low resolution. It is often difficult to determine a person's gender, race, or age by reviewing head-in video recorder collision video. Estimating a train's speed by reviewing head-in video is extremely difficult. Train speeds at the time of a collision can be obtained by railroad personnel at the scene. Incidents that occur on sharp curves may not be captured by the head-in video recorder as the camera is not articulated and remains pointing forward. Locomotive identification information can be found on the outside of each locomotive. Locomotive unit numbers can be found under the control cab windows, on illuminated number boards on the locomotive's noses, and on the rear of the locomotive. The builder's plate can also be found attached to the front portion of the locomotive below the engineer's control cab window. The builder's plate is much like a VIN plate containing the locomotive's serial number, manufacturer, model, and year of construction. These plates vary in size and appearance but contain the same information and are found attached to the outside of the locomotives below the engineer's window. Emergency notification signs can be found attached to public highway rail grade crossing warning devices. These signs contain information to help first responders and the general public report issues associated with a specific crossing. Some Metrolink rails are marked to identify one track from another, track 1, track 2, etc. Some rails may have railroad milepost locations painted on them. This information can be extremely useful to Metrolink train dispatchers to determine from first responders where an incident has occurred and which tracks are affected. Notifying Metrolink directly by telephone is the preferred method when civil authorities need to stop trains in emergency situations. If, for whatever reason, telephonic contact cannot be made, there is an alternative way to signal trains to stop using lit road flares. Placing a lit flare on or near the railroad right-of-way will signal an engineer to stop their train. The train may actually pass by the lit flare, but it should begin slowing as soon as the lit flare is visually detected by the engineer. Once the train has come to a complete stop, it will begin moving forward at restricted speed, which is 20 miles an hour or less, for 1 mile. If the train does not encounter another flare or track obstruction, it will resume track speed. The lit flare should be placed on the rock ballast on the outside of the rail. Do not place lit flares on top of wooden railroad ties. To stop Metrolink trains, place lit flares at least 1 mile in each direction from the scene of the emergency. For freight trains, place flares 2 miles and 1 mile in each direction from the scene of the emergency. When there are more than one set of tracks present and it's unknown which tracks could be used by trains approaching the area, place a lit flare between the 2 sets of tracks. Once rail traffic has come to a stop and it is safe to do so, extinguish all lit flares on or near the railroad right-of-way. Train operators and crews involved in collisions with trespassers or motor vehicles are not subject to state or local highway laws. The Federal Railroad Administration's alcohol and drug testing regulations exempt a train crew who have been involved in a highway rail grade crossing collision from federal testing. Trains have much longer stopping distances, and crews have little or no chance to avoid an impact by the time they have spotted a person or vehicle on the tracks in front of their train. Railroad employees involved in a collision at a highway rail grade crossing or other location have no obligation to submit to a breath or toxicological test requested by the state or local law enforcement officials, unless there is probable cause to show the employee committed a criminal act. A train crew's involvement in a fatal collision should not be the lone factor in determining whether cause for testing exists. Trains are not considered motor vehicles, and train operating employees are not required to carry a state-issued driver's license. Per California Vehicle Code 12953, on-duty train crew members are not required to present a state-issued driver's license to law enforcement officers investigating a highway rail grade crossing collision or trespass fatality. Railroad employees will carry and present an engineer or conductor certificate and employee identification card issued by the railroad they work for. Train crew members involved in fatalities or collisions can experience mental as well as physical trauma. Train crew members should be treated with empathy, respect, and given the same level of common courtesy officers would show to a citizen involved in a similar incident. In all cases, no matter how involved an investigation becomes at the scene, always expect a train on any track from either direction.